Have you ever wondered how one random moment, one choice to step outside in the rain, could completely change the course of your life? How a single act of kindness, as small as fixing a stranger's broken motorbike, could lead to a love story powerful enough to heal old wounds? That's exactly what happened to a man named Daniel Rivers, a single father in Portland, Oregon, who had no idea that the woman he helped one stormy evening wasn't just a lost traveler, but a billionaire hiding from the weight of her world. The rain that day fell hard against the tin roof of Daniel's modest auto garage on Belmont Street. The smell of oil and steel hung in the air, and the sound of tools clinking echoed faintly in the cramped space. Daniel stood by the workbench, wiping his calloused hands with a grease-stained rag, his thoughts drifting as they often did to the woman he had loved and lost. 2 years earlier, his wife Emily had died of breast cancer. She had been his anchor, his partner, his best friend. Losing her had left a hollow ache in his chest that no amount of work could fill. Every night before she passed, Emily had whispered the same words to him. "Promise me you'll smile again? Teach our daughter to be kind, Daniel, and don't forget to love yourself one day." Those words had carried him through the darkness, but just barely. On this particular evening, as the downpour blurred the neon lights outside, Daniel heard the sputter of a motorcycle engine choking to silence. Through the foggy window, he spotted a figure, drenched, shivering, standing beside a vintage Harley Davidson. The woman wore a black leather jacket, her dark hair plastered to her face from the rain, but she didn't shout for help, didn't pull out a phone. She just stood there, quiet and strangely fragile in the storm. Daniel had seen that look before. He knew what it meant to be stranded, not just on the road, but in life. Something about her posture struck a chord deep inside him. Without thinking, he pushed open the garage door and stepped into the rain. "Need a hand?" His voice cut through the storm. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were striking but tired, as if they carried the weight of miles no one else could see. I I think it just died on me," she said softly, her voice trembling from the cold. Daniel crouched by the Harley, checking the engine with a practiced glance. The bike was a beauty, but he noticed right away it hadn't been ridden much. Probably clogged fuel lines. He motioned to the garage. "Bring it inside. I'll take a look. You're soaked through." She hesitated, then nodded. Together, they wheeled the heavy machine into the warm glow of the shop. Inside, she perched on a worn plastic chair, watching as Daniel pulled his tools from the bench. He worked methodically, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the machine. She studied him, the rugged face, the faint lines etched from grief, the quiet focus of a man who didn't waste words. Finally, he spoke. "Fuel lines are clogged. Nothing major. Just needs clearing out." "How much will it cost?" she asked, reaching instinctively for her wallet. Daniel shrugged without looking up. $50. Her brows furrowed. "Only 50? In San Francisco, this would cost at least $200. He stopped, glancing at her curiously. "Why pay more than the work's worth?" For a moment she was silent, caught off guard by the simplicity of his response. In her world, everything had a price tag. Status, respect, even relationships. But here, in this small garage, value wasn't measured in money. Daniel returned to his work, but before he could finish, the sound of small footsteps echoed from the back. "Daddy, I'm hungry." A little girl with pigtails and a peanut butter sandwich in her hand came bouncing in. Her big brown eyes landed on the stranger, and she grinned. "Hi, you're really pretty," she said without hesitation. The woman's face softened instantly. "Why, thank you. What's your name?" "I'm Sophie, and this is my daddy. He's the best at fixing cars. He says cars are like people. They need love to run well." Daniel flushed, but the woman smiled, warmth flickering in her expression for the first time that evening. "Your daddy's right," she said sincerely. "I think I haven't loved this bike enough." I have to pause here and say, this little exchange between Sophie and the stranger, it was more than just small talk. It was the first crack in the billionaire's carefully built armor. Sometimes it's children who see through us the quickest, who remind us of what's real. The rain continued pounding outside, so Daniel invited the woman to stay for dinner. "It's nothing fancy," he said, plating up spaghetti and salad. But as the three of them sat together, Sophie chatting about school and her dream of becoming a veterinarian, Daniel noticed something extraordinary. The woman wasn't checking her phone, wasn't distracted, wasn't pretending. She was listening, really listening. "Do you have kids?" Sophie asked innocently. The woman hesitated, then shook her head. "No, sweetheart, I don't." "Then you can borrow my daddy sometimes," Sophie said matter-of-factly, "but you have to share him with me." Daniel nearly choked on his spaghetti, but the woman laughed, an unguarded, genuine laugh. She hadn't realized how much she missed the sound of her own joy. When the rain finally let up, Daniel had finished repairing the Harley. The engine roared back to life smoothly. "How much do I owe you again?" she asked, holding out a crisp bill. 50, Daniel repeated. But instead of leaving, she hesitated. Her eyes lingered on the warm light of the garage, on Sophie's sleepy smile, on Daniel's quiet strength. Finally, she asked, almost shyly, "Would it be all right if I came back tomorrow? Just to make sure everything's running fine?" Daniel met her gaze, something unreadable flickering there. "The garage is always open." And that was the beginning. What Daniel didn't know, and what the woman wasn't ready to reveal, was that her name was Isabella Marquez, and she wasn't just a traveler. She was the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire in San Francisco. She had everything money could buy: power, influence, success, but she had never once felt the kind of simple, unfiltered belonging she experienced that night in a mechanic's garage. She came back the next day, and the day after that, always with a new excuse. "Just checking the bike," or "Can you show me how to do basic maintenance?" Daniel never pressed, though he noticed her curiosity wasn't about engines. It was about people, about his daughter, about the ordinary life she seemed to crave. Maria, the coffee shop owner next door, teased Daniel when she saw them together. "Haven't seen you this cheerful in years, Danny." Isabella blushed but didn't deny it. For the first time in forever, she felt alive. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but simply as a woman rediscovering what it meant to connect. What none of them realized yet was how fragile this new bond was. Because secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, always find a way to surface. And when Isabella's world finally collided with Daniel's, it would test not just their hearts, but their very definition of love. Have you ever had a secret so heavy on your chest that every smile you gave felt borrowed? That's what Isabella Marquez carried each time she stepped back into Daniel's little garage. To him and Sophie, she was just Bella, a mysterious woman with a Harley and a warm laugh. But in reality, she was one of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley. And every time Sophie looked up at her with those innocent brown eyes, Isabella felt the guilt pressing harder against her ribs. In the days that followed their rainy night meeting, Isabella returned to Belmont Street daily. Sometimes she brought fresh coffee and croissants from Maria's cafe. Other times she brought excuses. "The brakes feel a little stiff," or "Could you teach me how to check the oil?" Daniel played along, never questioning too much, though deep down he knew something didn't quite add up. But he liked her company, more than he wanted to admit, and Sophie adored her. The little girl would tug at Isabella's hand, asking her to play with dolls or draw silly animals on scrap paper in the corner of the garage. Isabella hadn't drawn since childhood, but Sophie didn't care about her shaky lines or mismatched colors. She cared that Isabella was present. "Do you know what this is?" Sophie asked one afternoon, holding up a crude drawing of a cat. "A lion?" Isabella guessed, laughing. "No, it's a cat superhero. She saves other animals." Sophie's eyes sparkled. "That's incredible," Isabella said softly. "Maybe you'll be an artist one day." "No," Sophie shook her head. "I'll be a vet. Daddy says cars and animals are alike. Both need love to work right." Daniel, overhearing, chuckled. "Don't put words in my mouth, kiddo." But she's not wrong. Watching them, Isabella felt something she hadn't in years: belonging. It was strange how quickly ordinary routines became her refuge. Dinner at Daniel's table, Sophie showing her school projects, Daniel teaching her the difference between torque and horsepower. These weren't boardrooms or luxury penthouses. They were something rarer, something real. But reality has a cruel way of catching up. On Friday afternoon, as Isabella was laughing with Sophie over a crooked peanut butter sandwich, her phone dead for days by choice, finally turned back on. Within seconds, it buzzed relentlessly. 15 missed calls, dozens of texts, emails stacked higher than she could scroll. One call came through again. Jessica, her assistant. Isabella froze, then answered in a hushed tone. Elena, thank God, where are you? The board is panicking. Stocks dropped 12%. Reporters are circling like vultures. We need you in San Francisco immediately. Daniel's head lifted sharply. Sophie looked confused. The words board, stocks, reporters hung heavy in the air. Isabella's face drained of color. She ended the call quickly, but the damage was done. Board? Stocks? Daniel repeated slowly, his voice low, edged with something sharp. What exactly do you do, Bella? The garage felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. Isabella looked at Sophie, then back at Daniel. She wanted to lie. She wanted to protect this fragile world she had built, but his eyes demanded the truth. I'm not just Bella, she said finally, her voice breaking. My name is Isabella Marquez. I'm the CEO of Marquez Technologies. I came here to get away. From all of it. From fake people, fake love, endless work. I just wanted to feel human again. Silence. Only the ticking clock on the wall. Daniel's jaw tightened. So, this was what? Some kind of vacation? Playing poor for a week? Slumming it in my garage because it felt authentic? No, she pleaded, stepping closer. It wasn't like that. What I felt here, with you, with Sophie, it's the most real thing I've ever known. But Daniel's grief and anger twisted together like a storm. You lied to me, to my daughter. You let her believe you'd stay, when the whole time you were just visiting from your empire. Sophie's lip trembled. Daddy, why are you mad at Bella? Daniel's voice cracked. Go inside, Sophie. But now! The little girl ran into the house, sobbing. Isabella's chest caved in. She had survived boardroom wars, ruthless competitors, even heartbreak, but nothing had ever hurt like watching Sophie cry because of her. Daniel turned away, shoulders rigid. You should leave. Daniel, please! Leave! His voice was final. Isabella stood frozen for a moment, her heart shattering in the hum of silence. Then she grabbed her helmet, pushed her Harley out the door, and into the night rain once more. She rode aimlessly through Portland's slick streets, her vision blurred with tears. Every mile put more distance between her and the only place she had felt truly alive. And yet, she couldn't let go of the sound of Sophie's laughter, the warmth in Daniel's eyes before the truth unraveled. Back in San Francisco 2 days later, Isabella sat in her glass-walled office overlooking the bay. The city sparkled beneath her, but all she could see was the glow of Daniel's garage and Sophie's messy drawings. Her empire was intact, her power unquestioned. But for the first time, success tasted bitter. Jessica noticed. You look different, she said gently. Sad, like you're missing something. Isabella didn't answer. How could she explain that all her billions couldn't buy the one thing she wanted? An ordinary family dinner with pasta and laughter. And here's where my personal thought kicks in. This is why people crave authenticity. We live in a world where wealth, titles, and achievements impress everyone. But none of those things can hug you at night or draw a crooked cat superhero for you. Isabella had everything, yet she was starving for exactly what Daniel and Sophie lived every day. But fate wasn't done. 2 weeks later, an unknown Oregon number flashed on Isabella's phone. She answered, her pulse racing. Isabella? This is Maria. From the coffee shop next to Daniel's garage. Her voice was panicked. Sophie had an accident. She fell off her bike. Head injury. She's in a coma at the hospital. Daniel won't leave her side. He's breaking. Please, I think he needs you. Isabella's blood ran cold. She didn't wait. She canceled all meetings, booked the first flight back to Portland, and prayed the entire way. When she arrived at Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, her heart nearly stopped at the sight. Sophie lay pale and motionless, wires and monitors surrounding her. Daniel sat slumped in a chair, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, holding his daughter's hand as if afraid she'd slip away. He looked up when Isabella entered. Shock flickered in his face, then guarded silence. I came as soon as I heard, she whispered, sitting beside him. Daniel's voice was raw. The doctors say she might need surgery. My insurance won't cover it. They want to transfer her to a public hospital, but he trailed off, his voice breaking. She deserves better. Isabella didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone. Jessica, transfer $500,000 immediately to Organ Health. Patient, Sophie Rivers. Get their best neurology team on this. Daniel grabbed her wrist, eyes blazing. I can't let you. This isn't for you, she interrupted, tears brimming. It's for her. Let me do this. Please. For the first time, Daniel didn't fight. He lowered his head, shoulders shaking as silent tears fell. Why did you come back? Isabella met his gaze, unflinching. Because I love her, and because I love you. You two are my family, whether you want me to be or not. The next 3 days blurred into one long vigil. Isabella barely slept, holding Sophie's hand, whispering stories of faraway places, praying for her to wake. Daniel watched quietly, seeing a side of her no boardroom or headline had ever shown. Not the billionaire, not the CEO. Just a woman who loved his daughter as fiercely as he did. And then, on the third morning, Sophie stirred. Her small eyes fluttered open. Bella? Her voice was faint. Isabella burst into tears. Sweetheart, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere ever again. Daniel stood frozen, then sank into the chair beside them, tears streaming freely. In that moment, his anger cracked. He realized she hadn't come back out of guilt or obligation. She came because her heart belonged with them. The walls he had built since Emily's death began to crumble. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the hardest walls to break aren't built of bricks or stone, but of grief and fear? That was the fortress around Daniel Rivers' heart. For years he had lived with the ache of loss, protecting himself and his daughter Sophie from anyone who might hurt them again. But after Isabella returned, not as a billionaire CEO, but as a woman who refused to leave Sophie's bedside, those walls began to show cracks. The morning Sophie opened her eyes, the entire hospital room shifted. The beeping of machines no longer felt like a countdown, but like a rhythm of hope. Isabella clutched Sophie's tiny hand, her tears soaking the bedsheet. Sweetheart, you scared us, she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from the child's face. Sophie blinked, still weak, but managed a faint smile. I dreamed Mommy told me to wake up, because Daddy and Bella needed me. Daniel's breath caught. He reached for his daughter's other hand, overcome by the innocence and weight of her words. For so long, Emily's memory had been his anchor, but now in this fragile hospital room, it felt as if Emily herself had given her blessing. Isabella spent every waking hour at Sophie's side. She read her stories, brought her coloring books, even convinced a nurse to sneak in a puppy from the therapy program so Sophie could laugh again. And Daniel saw it all. He saw the woman who once commanded boardrooms now sit cross-legged on a hospital floor, braiding Sophie's hair. He saw her cancel multi-million-dollar deals with a single text just so she could stay. And little by little, his anger began to dissolve. Still, he was cautious. Late one night, after Sophie had drifted back to sleep, Daniel stepped into the hallway with Isabella. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above them. You didn't have to come back, he said, his voice low. I did, Isabella replied firmly, because you and Sophie, you're not just part of my life anymore. You are my life. Daniel shook his head. You're used to skyscrapers, private jets, dinner with investors. This, he gestured to the peeling hospital paint, to his oil-stained jacket. This is my world. It's small, ordinary. I don't know if you can really choose it. Isabella stepped closer, her eyes steady. Daniel, I've had everything money could buy. And yet, I've never felt more alive than when Sophie handed me a sandwich she made with her own 2 hands. I don't want extraordinary. I want real. I want you. He didn't answer, but his silence wasn't rejection this time. It was fear. Fear of believing her and losing everything again. Over the next week, Sophie grew stronger. The doctors called her recovery a miracle, though Daniel secretly believed Isabella's love had something to do with it. The day she was discharged, Isabella insisted on paying the remaining hospital bills. Daniel protested at first, but Isabella's words silenced him. This isn't charity. This is family. Back at the little house, life began to fall into a rhythm. Mornings started with pancakes, sometimes heart-shaped, sometimes lopsided because Isabella had never learned to cook properly. Sophie giggled at her attempts, covering them with too much syrup. Daniel pretended to complain, but deep down, he loved the sight of Isabella in his kitchen, hair tied back, laughing over burnt batter. At the garage, Isabella surprised everyone. She rolled up her sleeves and learned how to change oil, patch tires, even replace brake pads. Daniel found himself stealing glances at her, her expensive watch covered in grease, her designer jacket traded for an old t-shirt. She was clumsy at first, but determined. "You don't have to do this," he told her one afternoon as she fumbled with a wrench. "I know," she replied, smirking, "but I want to. You fix cars. I want to fix the pieces of myself I lost." And slowly she did. Maria from the coffee shop would often stop by with lattes and shake her head with a smile. "I've never seen Daniel this light since Emily passed. Whatever you're doing, Bella, don't stop." Even Sophie noticed. One evening, as she colored on the porch, she looked up at her father. "Daddy, do you love Bella?" Daniel froze, his heart thudding. "Why do you ask, Pumpkin?" "Because you smile more when she's here. And Mommy told me in my dream that it's okay if you love again. She said Bella takes care of us now." Daniel swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Children had a way of cutting straight to the truth. That night, he sat outside in the backyard, staring at the stars. Isabella joined him, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Do you ever regret coming back?" he asked quietly. She shook her head without hesitation. "Daniel, I didn't leave anything behind. My company's fine. My team is strong. But what I nearly lost was this. You, Sophie, this family. That's the only success I want." Maria from the coffee shop had become their unofficial family friend. She often teased Daniel when she caught him sneaking glances at Isabella. "You know, Danny, for a man who once said he'd never love again, you're doing a terrible job of hiding it." Daniel would grumble, but his eyes always betrayed him. Truth was, he was happier than he'd been in years. And Sophie noticed too. "Daddy smiles more now," she told her teacher one day, "because Bella takes care of us." But happiness, as Daniel knew too well, is something fragile. One evening, Isabella received a call that threatened to shatter the life she had built. It was her board of directors. "Miss Marquez," one of them began, "the company needs you back in San Francisco full-time. Investors are demanding it. Your absence is raising concerns. If you don't return, we may be forced to consider new leadership." Isabella listened quietly, then hung up. For hours she sat alone, staring at her phone, the weight of two worlds pressing on her chest. She had built Marquez Technologies from nothing. It was her blood, her sweat, her legacy. But here, with Daniel and Sophie, she had found the one thing success could never give her. Love that was real. That night, she told Daniel, "They want me back, permanently. If I don't return, I could lose everything I built." Daniel's heart clenched, but he hid it. "Then maybe you should go." Isabella looked at him, her eyes fierce. "Do you want me to go?" He shook his head. "What I want doesn't matter. I don't want you to resent me for making you give up your world." She reached for his hand. "Daniel, don't you get it? I've lived that world, and I hated it. I don't want boardrooms. I want this. You, Sophie. Pancakes, oil-stained overalls, and backyard stars. That's my world now." He studied her, searching for doubt. But there was none. For the first time, Isabella wasn't running away from responsibility. She was running toward love. 2 weeks later, Isabella held a press conference. Cameras flashed, reporters clamored. Everyone expected an announcement of her triumphant return. Instead, she stunned the world. "Effective immediately," she declared, "I'm stepping down as CEO of Marquez Technologies. I'll continue as an advisor. But I've realized that success isn't measured by wealth or titles. It's measured by the love we give and receive. And I've finally found mine." The room erupted in chaos, but Isabella walked away smiling. For the first time, she didn't care about headlines. She cared about the two people waiting for her at home. Back in Portland, life blossomed even brighter. Isabella threw herself into helping Daniel expand the garage. With her business knowledge and his craftsmanship, They transformed Thompson Auto into Rivers and Marquez Auto Care, a community hub known for fairness and kindness. Customers who once struggled now found not just repairs, but compassion. Sophie thrived too. With Isabella by her side, she laughed louder, dreamed bigger, and often whispered before bed, "Mommy, thank you for sending Bella." And Daniel? He finally let go of fear. The grief that once chained him loosened, replaced by hope. He found himself laughing again, even singing while fixing cars. A sound Maria swore she hadn't heard in years. The proposal came on a quiet evening. Daniel wasn't a man for grand gestures, but that night, as they sat under the stars in the backyard, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I don't have billions," he said softly, "or penthouses or jets. All I have is a garage, a little girl, and a heart that's finally ready to love again. Bella, will you marry me?" Isabella's hands trembled as she opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond from a jeweler. It was a simple gold band, polished to shine but clearly handmade. She looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. "Daniel Rivers, you could have given me a ring made of tin and I'd still say yes, because the only treasure I've ever wanted is right here." The kiss that followed wasn't just love, it was a promise of healing, of new beginnings, of a family forged not by blood, but by choice. The wedding happened 3 months later, not in a cathedral, not in a five-star hotel, but in Daniel's garage. They hung strings of lights across the ceiling beams, decorated with wildflowers from Morgan Fields, and set up folding chairs for neighbors and friends. Maria baked the cake. Sophie, beaming with pride, walked down the aisle as the flower girl. Daniel stood at the altar, his hands shaking until he saw Isabella walking toward him in a simple white dress, her smile radiant. When it was time for vows, Isabella spoke first. "I spent my life chasing success, thinking it would make me whole. But real success is standing here today, joining hands with the man who taught me love doesn't need wealth, it needs courage. And with Sophie, we are not just a family. We are a miracle." Daniel's voice broke as he replied, "I thought love had ended for me when Emily left this world. But you and Sophie showed me that love isn't about replacing the past. It's about building a future. And today, I promise to build it with you, one ordinary, beautiful day at a time." The room was filled with tears and applause, but the loudest cheer came from Sophie, who shouted, "Yay! Now I have a mommy again!" The reception was simple: homemade food, laughter, neighbors dancing to old country songs. But for Daniel, Isabella, and Sophie, it was more magical than any royal banquet, because it was theirs. That night, as they sat together on the porch, Isabella whispered, "I used to think I needed the world to see me. Now I only need you to see me." Daniel kissed her forehead. "I always will." And Sophie, curled up between them, sighed happily. "This is perfect." The Harley Davidson sat in the corner of the garage that night, gleaming under the lights. Next to it was Daniel's old pickup and Sophie's little pink bicycle. 3 vehicles, 3 lives, 1 family. And if you ask me, that's the kind of ending we all crave. Not riches, not headlines, not power, but love that shows up in the rain, fixes what's broken, and chooses to stay.